Hello and welcome to the Sorted Post-Purchase podcast. I'm joined today by my colleague, Dan Greenall, who is VP of Marketing and Product. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Good to see you, Shaun. Thanks for having me.
No problem. It's a bit of a mouthful, that, isn't it? Post-Purchase podcast. We're going to have to get used to that one.
Indeed. Say that after a beer.
Friday nights could be more difficult. All right, let's dig into the central theme of WISMO and driving e-commerce growth and engagement. So we should clear what WISMO stands for. It stands for Where is my order? And it's quite a hot topic for retailers at the moment, isn't it?
It is. It has been a hot topic for retailers for some time. I think whilst it's nice to now say that the pandemic is comfortably in the rearview mirror, I think that period of time really shone the magnifying glass on WISMO as a problem.
Absolutely.
You know, retailers are wrestling with it to varying degrees, but the long story short is it can be an expensive problem, and when you layer into that kind of peak seasonality, which obviously all retailers experience, then you've got something that you need to plan ahead for.
Yeah, well, we're all about solutions here. So let's talk about crowded markets as well. And I guess personalisation can be a great differentiator if you're in a crowded market.
Of course it can. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a marketeer. So a lot of what we try and do in my profession is cut through the noise and use personalisation in its many forms to try and do that. So if we think about personalization in a delivery experience context, then there's a few ways you can think about that. And I think the way that I see it is there's a spectrum. At one extreme of that spectrum, you have a very transactional approach to communicating with consumers about their order and their deliveries and everything that happens beyond the actual purchase of a product. What I mean by that in practice is there might be a dispatch email that goes to you as a consumer, and then beyond that point you might get the odd email, sometimes even an SMS from a carrier that it contains digits, but doesn't really talk to you as Shaun. So that's one extreme. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got almost the inverse of that, where you have an experience that is a continuum. So everything that you've done on the retailer's website in terms of choosing the raincoat that was advertised to you via Instagram, putting that in your basket, selecting the size, selecting the time and date that you wanted to receive that raincoat, and then once you bought it, getting the confirmation, but then being told by the retailer when you're likely to receive it, whether it's still going to be with you when the retailer said it was going to be with you, but doing all of that without the confusion of, for want of a better phrase, logistics language, and partnering it with a tracking experience that is in that retailer's domain. That's the other extreme. That's where you continue the pre-purchase experience beyond into the post-purchase experience, and it's that extreme we want to sort of focus on more, isn't it? To enable retailers to retain and attract and retain more customers. So what role does technology play in enabling that sort of personalized delivery experience and getting to that other end of the spectrum, as you said? Yeah, it's a good question. So tech is the enabler to reach, let's call that the utopia. Okay. There are two things that are the key ingredients to make that happen. Actually, three things. Okay. So, as a retailer, what you need is a piece of software that can consume two things and mesh them together to enable you as a retailer to deliver those notifications as if they were coming from you directly. Those two ingredients are the shipment data, so exactly what it is that has been ordered and when it is intended to be delivered. We often refer to that as the promise date. And then the carrier tracking events. In other words, those data points, those scans that happen when the parcel is in the network that tell the retailer, but also tell the consumer what is happening. So, is the parcel there for delivery? Is it going to land when they were saying it was going to land? Or is it lost, damaged, something kind of not particularly nice? So you need a piece of software that can ingest those two things, mesh them together, normalize that data, and then give you the power to use that data to issue those communications and facilitate those tracking experiences that I mentioned.
And that's a lot of data we're talking about now as well, isn't it? And that must be quite a challenge for retailers, integrating sometimes with legacy systems as well. So how are retailers managing challenges like this?
It's there are a few ways that this type of solution can be put into practice. What I see is most retailers have some kind of technology team that is very literate when it comes to API integrations. That is generally how data that relates to the shipment is passed from A to B. And increasingly so, that's the case with the carrier tracking events as well, but there are different flavors to both of those things. The technicalities of that are, and I'm not a technical person, as you can probably tell, and anyone who knows me will attest to. The time and technicalities around doing that are relatively straightforward for the retailer. The power really is in the platforms that take those data points and turn them into something meaningful. So, for example, if we focus on the tracking event side of things, which ostensibly is the piece that powers the communication to the consumer, that's the bit that has the critical data in it, i.e. it's going to be there on time or it's not going to be there on time. The magic is in converting those tracking events into something which is useful. So what you find with platforms that exist in this space, and let's be clear, I run Product for Sorted and we have a product that does this, is we take all those tracking events and we use them to create rules that help the retailer determine if something is going to be late or whether it might be missing in the network.
You get that dashboard view, sort of an overview of the journeys.
Yeah. And so what that ultimately allows the retailer to do is have communication pathways that are set up for what we call the happy path. So to keep you informed when everything's going A-OK, or the unhappy path. And that can be driven from some of those rules, or it can also be driven off the back of carrier events themselves. So we get scan events from carriers that tell us when something might not be right, and we can use that or retailers can use that to trigger notifications to affected consumers.
Well, final question, I suppose, in this episode, do you think businesses will get better at navigating between the unhappy path and the happy path?
My personal view on this is that we're at the very beginning of establishing this as a best practice. So if we break that down, I think most retailers, certainly the retailers that we speak to, I speak to, understand at a high level the value of having a holistic pre and post purchase brand experience. Okay. It does many things. Some things we've not touched on. It creates additional marketing moments. It reduces WISMO, all of those good things, right? That's quite simple to get your head around. But then there is the okay, how do I harness the power of this to do the unhappy path side of things? And I think what we see is that is the part of the power of this type of product that is still relatively nascent. And retailers, we encourage retailers to experiment in that space and explore how they might be able to use that. So we're big advocates of kind of using historical data and isolating where there might be regions or product areas or carrier services that might be repeatedly causing WISMO problems, and then looking at that and saying, well, how can we help solve that with proactive communications? And so
I think it's
that's
clear.
a really interesting journey to go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it's clear that technology and that exploration and experimentation that you talked about is going to play a huge part in personalisation as well, and will continue to do so. So thanks for sharing your insight, Dan. Let's come back to the core theme of WISMO in another episode, and perhaps dive deeper into how retailers can better use that customer data as well. But thank you, Dan.
No problem. Thanks, Shaun.
If you have any questions about personalisation or want to find out more about certain technologies or personalisation strategies, leave a message below or visit sorted.com. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel or subscribe to our newsletter to stay bang up to date with post-purchase. See, I told you it would get me, Dan. Bye for now. See you in the next episode.